A couple years ago, I was hanging out with my friends just up the street at a Seahawks football party. So much fun. My friend Kelly hosts them, and so we got all sorts of people that come, and he puts out a theme and then says, hey, we're going to do this type of theme. If it's in Philly, we're playing the Eagles, we're going to bring cheese, we're going to cook cheesesteaks, and everybody brings something that's related to Philadelphia, that sort of thing. Well, one time, Kirk, another friend of mine, shows up, and he's pretty excited. He's got a brand new Costco veggie tray. Now, some of you are saying, "Oh, that's terrible vegetables," but he was trying to be good, and it was awesome. I was pretty excited about it. All right, Kirk, that's awesome. He opened the plastic top of that thing, and the odor of broccoli, and not just good broccoli, but just terrible broccoli, just filled the room. And so he just ran it outdoors and dumped it in the yard waste container. And everybody just teased him mercilessly, like, thanks a lot, Kirk. But isn't that the truth? Sometimes we're trying hard to be a blessing, trying hard to bring a good aroma into the room, right? And it just goes sideways. We're trying to be a blessing, but instead we're bringing a curse. As Christians, we want to bring the fragrance of Jesus into all these different environments to help people understand how good and gracious and loving and kind and humble and gentle Jesus is, and how he's a savior, and how he's done this great work in our lives. And sometimes we just mess up, and it turns into a curse. So that when people look at us, look at Christians, they say, wow, what a mess. I don't want to be like that person. There's no love there. There's no sense of even respect. And I feel that way about the recent events this week in the Capitol. I was dismayed, along with maybe many of you, to see the cross of Christ being elevated in the plaza as a symbol of what? Insurrection? Interesting. And who knows what the purpose of that was? Maybe those people were calling other people away from violent activity, but it didn't seem so. And maybe the jury's still out on that. But the posters about Jesus saves, well, yeah, absolutely. But I just want you to think about that debacle with the cross, 20-foot cross being stood out there, and Jesus saves, and punching the Capitol Police, and just a weird kind of dumb insurrection. Like, that's not a really great way to take over a Capitol if you're thinking about it. But also, there were gallows hung up there. People put up gallows, and who knows what all the symbols meant and why they did it, but it sure looks to the world that Christians don't have anything to be respected. They don't have a position to be appreciated anyway. There's no honor there. There was really only shame, and maybe an attempt to bring a blessing, to take back America for Jesus. Maybe an attempt to be a blessing turned out to be a curse. And as we look at the Bible, as we've been looking at Abram in Genesis chapter 12. You can start flipping through there with me, because we're gonna be moving through that passage. We've looked at Abram's call from the Babylonians and all those gods. Yahweh says, "Go, and I'll show," and Abram obeys. He says, "Go, and I'll show." Go, leave your family, leave your country, leave your household, just leave your kindred. Go, and I'll show. And he does do that. So out of all the other gods, Yahweh shows up and says, I want you to go. And he does. So he go, and I'll show. And then he says, I will make your name great and make a great nation out of you. Well, think about that. Just a chapter before, in Genesis 11, we have mankind saying, we will make a great name for ourselves. We will make a great nation. And you know what? We'll have God on a string. We'll be able to bring God down, because we're going to build our temple steps so high, we'll have God at our beck and call. It reminds me of posting a cross in the Capitol Plaza, saying, we are going to take this take this country back, or we're going to make a great name for ourselves, and we're going to make a great nation again, and whatever. There's an interesting impulse, but it's a Babylon impulse that says we will make a great name for ourselves. But instead, what does Yahweh say to Abram? I will make your name great, and I will make you a great nation. There's an impulse there that we need to consider. Are we expecting that we can make our name great and we can do it by our own resources, and maybe God can bless us, but we're going to get this thing done? Or are we waiting on God? There's a lot here. He says, I will bless you and make you a blessing to all other nations. Two parts of that. One, all of the nations will look at you and say, wow, I wish I was like Abram. May you be like Abram and have his blessing fall upon, God's blessing fall upon you like it has upon Abram. And also that Abram and his family would be a channel of blessing to other nations. But Abram, for one, struggles and often fails to be God's partner in blessing the nations. I mean, just the next few verses in Genesis chapter 12. Open that up. And does that sound familiar? Maybe there's hope for us in the midst of this. Well, I want to be a blessing. I don't want to be a curse. I want people to leave a conversation with me thinking great thoughts about Jesus. That's what I want. Oh, I want that so much. So maybe there's hope for us in this conversation. Because who is the faithful partner? Well, it's going to be God himself who does the work. God is the faithful partner. And Abram kind of stumbles over all of these things. But one thing is true about Abram. You never read a story, and there are lots of embarrassing stories. So I think they would have brought this one up if it had been there. Abraham never bowed to another god. After Babylon, and after being called out, he doesn't bow and worship another god, another idol. His loyalty to Yahweh is strong, but his execution is weak. His loyalty to Yahweh is strong, but his execution is really weak. His friendship, his partnership with God is flailing most of the time. Right? Can we find our home here? Loyalty to God, yes, okay, but my execution is just really weak. Flailing partnership. So that then and now, Yahweh, and Yahweh alone, the creator of the universe, is the faithful partner. Yahweh is the faithful partner. And he's going to make sure that a blessing comes out. And he's going to use us to do it. Wow. So when Abram shows up in the land that God has led him to, it says in chapter 12, now there was a famine in the land. So what would you think Abram would do? Okay, God said, I'm going to lead you to this land. I'm going to bless you. Everything's going to be great. Abram promptly turns around and leaves. I'm wondering if God is just saying, you just got here. Don't you trust me to be the faithful partner? But there's a famine. Yeah, but I control all things. So you can manage, right? I've been wondering what would have happened if he had stayed in the land. Now, there was a famine in the land, but Abram trusted that God was going to make him into a great nation and give him this land. I just imagine this traveling oasis, the streams in the desert, where God would just fill the area around Abram, and everybody would be like, wow, go camp next to Abram because God is blessing Abram. That's what that's using my sanctified imagination. That's what I'm wondering. But Abram goes to Egypt, and check this out. There's no traveling oasis of blessing. He actually causes plagues on Egypt. And he ends up plundering Pharaoh. Does that sound familiar? If you've read ahead at all in Exodus, you know that this is exactly what happened. He causes plagues on Pharaoh. Think about that. So he brings curses instead of blessings. He's supposed to be a channel of blessing to all the nations. People want to be like Abram. They want to bless their children. May you be like Abraham. And here he brings a curse. Do you guys know the story? Sarai, his wife, he says, Sarai's my sister, and so I don't want Pharaoh to kill me. And so when he finds out that she's beautiful and wants her for a wife, I'm going to just kind of back off and make a trade, and I'll get wealth out of it. This is true. He doesn't die and he gets wealth. But is that really God's blessing, or is that his way of conniving, his way of figuring out, I know, God, you said you were going to do this great thing, but I'm going to save my own skin. I'm going to flee to Egypt. And then when I get there, I'm going to trick the Pharaoh into thinking that, oh, she's just my sister, so I'm going to be fine. It says here, the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, verse 16, and for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep and oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But then Yahweh afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you've done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go." And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. And so then from there he goes up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had. Now this larger amount of things that he has. And Lot went with him into the lower area of Israel called the Negev. So trying to bring a blessing, I don't know. He's trying to do it on his own. So maybe trying to bring his own wisdom into it instead of trusting God knows what he's doing. And we can wait for him to do that. That's a huge lesson that I think we need to learn. But then as the story develops, we see in Genesis 13 that Lot decides, we're going to separate, and I'm going to choose this really fertile spot for my livestock next to a really wicked city, Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot says, "I want to go over here." Abram says, "That's great. We'll go over here. That way our herds can stay separate." And Abram's finally settling into his own land and what God wants to do there. And then the next chapter, Genesis 14, a coalition of kings. Now think a fortress city and surrounding pastures and little villages. That's the domain of a king. So a coalition of kings gather together and go on this campaign to wipe out, looks like 7 different giant clans, or clans led by some giants. So physically large, spiritually demonic, you might say. The Rephaim, the Zuzim, the Emim, just these names of demonic giant people or that lead these different areas. So these kings actually pull this off. They pull off a successful campaign against these 7 giant clans and their fortified cities. They overtake Sodom and the surrounding cities where Lot is. So Sodom and Gomorrah and the other kings in the valley decide they're going to come out and try to fight. They lose. Well, you would lose to these giant slaying kings who come through and destroy. So they did. They lost. And the giant slaying kings capture Lot and his family and all their goods and everything and dragged them off. So Abram puts together his warriors, just the servants in his own household and his male servants, female servants, all that. He puts together this warrior pack, and they actually go back and overtake them, defeat those kings, take Lot back in Yahweh's name. Talk about blessed. God is so committed to preserving Abram that he allows Abram, this wandering nomad, with all of his livestock and cattle, to put together an army and overtake these giant slaying kings. I mean, God is committed to blessing Abram and saving him and keeping him safe. So then he makes a covenant with Abraham to be the faithful partner and fulfill his promises to give the land and offspring. We see that in Genesis chapter 15. I'm going to make your descendants like the stars of the sky, or the sand, or the earth, the soil of the earth. Both numerous, like uncountable, but also there's a picture in the stars of they're going to be these royal rulers with me in the heavenly places. There's this really interesting picture in there. But then in Genesis 16, we see him waiting for this nation to be built, and he has no child. And we see an awful episode of mistrust of Yahweh, of taking things into his own hands. Literally, Abram has decided that, okay, I need to produce an heir, and so Sarai gives him her Egyptian slave mistress and says, go sleep with her and make a baby there. And maybe that's the way God is going to do his blessing, since God has been pretty slow. And this has really long-reaching consequences. The physical, the sexual abuse of this slave from Egypt that they received as a gift from Pharaoh has long-reaching consequences. It was a very sad mistrust event of mistrust of God. Hagar is the woman's name, and her name literally means the immigrant. She was used to bring about offspring instead of waiting on God. And there's some major long-standing complications to this day, as that firstborn son, Ishmael, would not be chosen to carry on the covenant, but he still would be blessed and have 12 tribes come from him. But sadly, we see his offspring become sworn enemies of the chosen son, Isaac, and all of his descendants. And so again, Abram and Sarai are hardly a blessing to the nations at this point. We have to keep looking to the future for the son of Abraham that would bring a blessing to all nations. We find that son, of course, in Jesus. And it's Jesus we follow to bring that blessing into the world. Remember, he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go into all the nations and bring this blessing of this good news to them so that they can learn to follow me and obey everything that I've commanded, because that's how the blessing spreads out through the earth. We're in a covenant with Jesus. We're sealed with his blood. The covenant is in his blood. And the covenant is meant to continue to bring blessing to all the families on the earth. We partner with him. As weak as we are in our execution, we partner with him to bring about that blessing to all families on the earth, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, and beyond, and to the world. We as a church, we have lots of opportunities to bring that blessing into some pretty difficult places overseas. But here's one thing we just need to lock in on. We are blessed to be a blessing, right? You're blessed in order that, so that we become a blessing. We're not a cul-de-sac of God's blessing. Whoa, look at that. Just kind of eddies out, and here we are. We're just enjoying the blessing. Wow, isn't this great? Isn't it wonderful? No, we're not a cul-de-sac. We're a through street. God has blessed us in order to be a blessing. We don't say, wow, look at me, I'm blessed. Oh, isn't it great? We're such blessed people. I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. Look at me, I'm blessed. No, we bless so that we can be a blessing. You've been served so that you can serve. You've been given so that you can give. So the question that I want us to think about is, do you bring a blessing with you? Do you bring a blessing along with you? You see, we can bring blessings or curses. Blessings or curses. And we bring a curse when we don't follow Jesus. An improper understanding of faith in Jesus can throw people off the track. That's a curse. If our interaction with them throws them off the track of following Jesus, that's a curse. That is not a blessing. If they're saying things like, wait, you follow Christ, right? You wear a cross and you post on social media a lot of Christian memes, so you're a follower of Christ, right? And then your answer is kind of, well, I'm more of a believer than a follower. I mean, I don't necessarily track with Jesus in the way of Jesus, but I do want to make sure that you're saved, so that if you check a box and you believe a certain amount of thing, faith, we looked at this last week, is believing loyalty. It always has been and always will be. It was the way the Old Testament people were saved. It's the way the New Testament people are saved. Believing loyalty. If you think about it, okay, so on this side we've got believing loyalty, and then over here you've got unbelieving disloyal people. That makes sense, right? Is there some middle ground? I believe, but I'm a traitor. I believe in Jesus, but I'm a traitor. No, it's one or it really is the other. Now, again, your loyalty to Yahweh can be firm and your execution can be weak. Welcome to life. But the goal of our life is to say, Jesus, would you fill me with a blessing so that I will be a blessing? Would you help me follow you? We don't want our lives to be a curse to other people because we don't follow Jesus. I want you to think about one Old Testament story that you probably know really well. Jonah. And he was called to go bring a message of blessing, a message of repentance, but that would include a blessing. Hey, repent so that God can restore you. And he was supposed to bring it to the enemies, sworn enemies of Israel, the bad guys, like ISIS today. Hey, go preach to ISIS. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So he gets in a ship and goes the other direction. He's like, no, I'm going to get as far away from this calling and this blessing. And he actually brings a curse with him, right? The sailors on board his ship are wondering, why is the world falling apart? And he's like, oh, that's me, because I'm not pursuing my calling. I'm not living out my mission. I'm disloyal to Yahweh. And they said, could you do something about that? And that's what we need. The world needs us to follow Jesus so that they can see an accurate perception of who he is and what it means to be loyal to Jesus. So we bring a curse when we don't follow Jesus. And I just want to do one more thing. We bring a curse when we are satisfied too easily. When we're satisfied easily. When we don't hunger and thirst for righteousness. Righteousness is right relationships. Like, I've done right by you. I've paid your wages, or I've been honest with you. I've done right by you. God cares about the poor, the marginalized, the family members that are estranged, the lonely people. And when we don't hunger and thirst for righteousness, and we just sit and go, well, I got my cup of whatever I wanted to drink, and I got the food I wanted to eat, and I'm comfortable in my own house, I'm satisfied. We bring a curse because the world can't see the righteous one fighting for and struggling for seeing the world brought into reconciliation with God. When we show that we are satisfied with the same things that the world is satisfied with, well, as long as I got my TV remote or my smartphone or my computer, my social media thing, I'm fine. Instead of a hunger and a longing for Jesus, who himself is the goal. He is the prize. He is the satisfier. So as we close, I want you just to consider a few questions to make sure that we are bringing a blessing. So when people speak with you, do they walk away with a word from Jesus? When people speak with you, do they walk away with a word from Jesus? When people meet with you, do they have a sense that they have met with Jesus? Do you leave an impression of yourself or of Jesus. Leave an impression. Another way to say that would be, are you trying to impress them with yourself, your wit, your wisdom, your ability to manage a situation, or are you leaving an impression of Jesus? You see, if we're going to bring a blessing into this world, it's going to be because we bring Jesus into this world. And at Issaquah Christian Church, we're all about bringing Jesus out into the world so that they see him, so that they smell him, not like a bad bunch of broccoli, like an aroma that will certainly turn some people away because they realize, wow, I just don't want to follow Jesus. I want to do my own thing. But for those who are broken, for those who realize their own sin, and maybe that's you right now, you realize how far away you are from Jesus. For those people, seeing Jesus and hearing from Jesus as we bring him into the world, with our words and with our actions, that will be life and light to them. So let's be those who receive the blessing of God and bless all those around us.